and happy Wednesday, world. Quick shout out to Dr. Diags, who's checking us out on Twitch. Good sir, thank you for joining us.
What's up, Doc?
You're welcome.
You guys are missing out. Doc's got some great information on the chat. I'll post it later so you guys can check it out, but great commentary as always. Always loved him as a poster when our .NET days would collide, but thanks for checking us out. My name is Sam. With me is Zeb and Ross. Gentlemen, how's it going?
Fantastic.
Awesome. Lived through the typhoon.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Ross is currently battling severe weather of rain and wind.
It's done now, though.
It's done now.
Wasn't there an earthquake out there, too?
Yeah. Nature hates Japan. Honestly, between typhoons, earthquakes, Godzilla, it's never ending.
Yeah, well, but the good news is that he's here now. He has internet, so that means he's going to be able to join us for the entire podcast. But that's great news. So, gentlemen, thank you for showing up. For Dr. Dags Online, thank you for checking us out. Obviously, he says he can't check out for the whole time, but we do appreciate it. And for that music, it is actually set up by my friend Dustin Brown. So you can find him on SoundCloud at BrownAMD. So he's got a bunch of stuff up there. All our music that we pre-stream with, that's all his. But gentlemen, the 2018 season is officially here. No more waiting, no more drafts, no more off-season news, but we're just dealing with meaningful football. So round of applause for the NFL for getting their shit together. And with that, Seahawks have a huge turnover from last year, but now it's time for this team to take on their opponents. We have the Denver Broncos coming up. Captains have been named. Roster has been trimmed down. Practice squad has been announced. And we even got a holdout to end, which I know Ross is waiting to talk about because we've been talking about this online, offline for a long time for podcasts and previous players. So that's going to be great. This is the 2018 Seahawks FanTable Podcast brought to you by Hawkscast, a Seahawks Community. Gentlemen, are you excited for some football?
I am. Absolutely. I'm ready. Let's do this.
I can't. If it was going to be another week longer, I couldn't make it. It's time.
There's technically going to be football tomorrow. Are you guys going to check out the game, the Falcons and the Eagles?
Oh, yeah. I'll be watching.
For sure. Probably the most important for me Friday morning game of the season.
Most important.
Just in the sense that I get actually it's a real football's now real.
Yeah.
I don't usually watch the Friday. For me, it's Friday morning. For you guys, it's Thursday night. But I don't usually get into it. But this one, I'm sure I'll be watching.
I think it's going to be a really good matchup because one, it's not it's most of the Super Bowl winning Philadelphia Eagles, but people are really going to be saying hey, how long is Nick Foles going to take on that team? He's gonna really get pushed aside once they determine Carson Wentz is healthy. I think that's kind of the big thing everyone's waiting for with that team.
Well, it's got to be. Foles kind of reverted to form in the preseason, so they've got to get him out of there fast.
I think it'll be interesting, but we're the Seahawks FanTable Podcast. We want to talk about the Seahawks. We got a bunch of topics. Also, we got a great Hawkscast Corner topic provided by Birdfinger. You can find him on Twitter at Birdfinger. Great comment. I'm really excited to talk about that one. But before we get into our topics, gentlemen, what are you guys going to be doing for this away game? So it's not a home game. It's not going to be local time for people on the West Coast. What are you guys going to do now that it's an away game? What is your ritual? Ross, I'm sure, is going to go to a temple and sacrifice a couple of things. But Zeb, what are you going to do this Sunday?
I'm just going to do the same thing I always do during the football season, and that's crawl out of bed sometime before noon, watch the rest of the early game, and then be ready for war.
Ross, what about you?
For me, it's obviously the games are a bit different times. So for me, it's a matter of Sunday night at 10 o'clock, arguing with myself whether I'm going to sleep a little bit and then wake up for the games in the middle of the night or stay up the whole night. And I'm going to decide, as tradition says, I'm going to decide just to get a nap, and then I'm going to ignore that decision and stay up all night.
Nice.
I do that every single week. Every single week I tell myself, well, from 10 o'clock at night to 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll just take a nap. and then that never ever has even happened once. So I'm doing that, and then staying up all night. It's I can't do my traditions. I usually have certain foods and things I want, but I'm on my diet. I'm not allowed to eat anymore. I eat once a day, so I guess it's like get a bunch of Diet Coke and water, and that's it.
Well, good luck to you, Ross, with your diet. I'm probably going to go hang out with my friend, probably invite myself over, get some Azelle fried chicken and bring it over because that's always a good thing to eat during a game. But definitely want to watch it with people. I'm really excited for this game. There's so many things. Shout out to Dr. Dags. He actually mentioned in the chat that with this team, it's kind of like you don't know what you're going to get. There's a lot of unknowns, and that means a lot of different things, and I definitely feel that way. But let's talk about it because it goes right into topic number one. Topic number one, the 53-man roster is set. Can the front office surprise us anymore? And we talked a lot about who we thought would stay. There was a topic on Hawkscast forum where we talked about, what is that roster going to look like? I put an actual 53-man roster projection. I was off at least one player, which is always the toughest. It's a fringe person in each position. But Zeb, what do you think about the transactions they made? Are there any surprises for you? Do you kind of feel like, like the people that were going to make it made it and the people that were going to kind of get pushed aside, there's no surprises? Did you feel that way?
I feel like it was probably one of the least surprising cut downs that we've had. There's always seems to be a guy or two that we think would stick or not make it, or vice versa. And I think it kind of went pretty much according to what we thought was going to happen this time around. A little less exciting than usual, I guess.
Ross, what about you? Did you? You've been talking about the roster all preseason long, all training camp long. Were there any surprises? Did this front office surprise you at all?
One should have been a surprise in a sense, but it wasn't just because of how things played out. Like Ed Dixon, never even gonna play it down. Probably. I mean, he's. I mean, he'll maybe come back, but they traded for another tight end, so who knows what's gonna happen there, right? But that was a bit of a surprise. Really, there wasn't nothing really I guess Darbo was a surprise in theory, but I was calling that since week one of training camp, and nothing. I mean, there was a couple not really surprises, but disappointments, right? You kind of wanted them to go with Magoo or even Austin. I mean, you once you go and trade for Hundley and give up a 6th rounder, but then you watch the last preseason game, you're like, how much better are odds with Hundley than Austin Davis? Really? Is it really worth a 6th rounder? Or even Magoo? To be honest, yeah, Magoo's really, I admit, he's not ready at all. But the fact is, if Russell Wilson's not out there, we're not going to win a lot of games anyway. So, let the guy play.
I think
I was shocked, but it was disappointing.
I think to that point really quickly is it's. I definitely think that if we just looked at it week 3, it made sense to make a change at the quarterback because both those guys, Davis and Magoo, didn't look great. Obviously, if you go from Russell Wilson to anyone else, it's going to be a big drop. But what happened was, once they made that trade for Brett Hundley, Magoo and Austin Davis actually had a pretty good 4th game. So I was pleased, and I think that made the trade a little bit harder to swallow. So I'm with you guys. I think there weren't a lot of surprises, not because there was opportunities to really surprise the team or surprise fans with these moves, but there a lot of people played well, and they kind of showed hey, this is my spot. I'm going to take it over. I think one of the things that is surprising to me is the fact that they added so many guys at the roster deadline. They added a tight end. They added a safety. They added what else? They added another position player. I think it was a linebacker, and I was kind of surprised to see that they made those 3 moves because I thought they would have been happy with what they had. Really quickly, Dr. Dax chimed in. He says, who is cut when Earl comes off the exception list? He was surprised that Brandon Marshall didn't get cut. And Maxwell, what's up with that? Highly disappointed that he ended up on IR. I actually was surprised by all the IR moves. Cam Chancellor, we knew what was going to happen. Byron Maxwell, he's not going to be able to come back until week 8. Eric Walden, who I thought had a great game in week 3 and 4.
That was really surprising.
He got put on the IR, and then Byron Maxwell, who didn't play at all, he got put on the IR as well.
I'm going to comment on Byron. Byron Maxwell, I think, is a time-buying move. Like, he's not properly hurt. I think it's, not a surprise cut, but a surprise of the depth chart is Trey Flowers ended up on 3rd string. And I think that's the guy they want to start. That's the guy I think they're buying time from. They know he's not ready now. Going to give him some time, hopefully get some playing time in. And at week 8, I think if he's grabbed up and he's solid and everybody's solid up, then Byron Maxwell just gets cut. But if it's falling apart, then they can pull him in and say, now you're the starter. So I think that's just a time-buying move while they let the youngsters figure out what they're actually going to be like.
I know a thing that the Seahawks are really, really fond of doing is they don't like to put fringe guys on that week 1 roster because it makes their contract guaranteed for the whole year. But if they cut them before week 1 and then sign them after the week 1 game's complete, then those contracts basically go week to week. So it's a way for them to kind of control their cap space. But a lot of players don't like to kind of be jerked around like that, so they kind of sign.
I kind of thought they were going to do that with Brandon Marshall.
Yeah.
Because week 1 of training camp, I thought, going into training camp, I didn't think he was going to make the roster. I kind of thought it would be a bad sign if he did. But he's really, really shown up. He seems kind of found the fountain of youth a little bit. So I thought they were going to do that with him, maybe. But he's there for real.
Yeah. Dex Chamson says kind of the same thing with Marshall. I think we definitely didn't see a lot, and this is where I think that depending on where you're getting your news, if you based it upon what you saw on the preseason games, Brandon Marshall was pretty non-existent. But if you read the local media, if you read the beat reporters, if you watch commentary about people that are watching the team online every day, Brandon Marshall seemed to be like a really huge get for this team, and the healthier he got, the more impact he made. So I'm pretty excited about that. 2 more things before we go on to topic number 2. Tyler Lockett got extended. That will lead us well into topic number 2. And also, the practice squad got announced. So, practice squad, of the 7 draft picks the Seahawks had, 5 of them made the 53-man roster. Alex Magoo was waived and then put onto the practice squad because he cleared waivers. And Jamarco Jones, the right tackle, had a high ankle sprain. He got put on IR, so that was a disappointment. I think he had a really great chance to make the 53-man roster. Any surprises on that practice squad?
Man. Practice squad is a little bit lower than punters and kickers in the normal season in the discussion. I couldn't normally tell you who's on it.
I think the one thing that I was surprised about, and if you guys weren't aware, it's fine. But Brandon Jackson, he was the guy that I thought was going to be starting as the defensive end, but apparently they really liked Quentin Jefferson and a couple other guys. But that was the guy I was surprised that actually got cut and then ended up making it back onto the practice squad. So, bit of a surprise for me on that one.
It's interesting when you think somebody's really, really good cut and they still survive to get to the practice squad. You wonder, are other teams not able to scout them properly, or are we just overvaluing our own players, or is it a little bit of both?
Yeah, but I think that's kind of...
Sorry, he's just going to say one more thing. In his case, it's surprising. I don't think it's so much that he didn't do as well as we kind of thought he was doing. I think Quentin Jefferson has surprised a lot of people. Like, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he's actually like a legit defensive end.
I think also the fact that they kept 5 defensive tackles in Poona Ford, I think that kind of pushed Brandon Jackson out a little bit because they activated Deion Jordan, who had not practiced all preseason and training camp, but he got activated, put on the 53-man roster, and there's no news that he's going to go to the IR. Whereas McKissick made the original 53-man roster, then got put on IR, so he can come back a little bit earlier. So that's, I think, a pretty big surprise too.
I think if Brandon Jackson had a little bit more interesting of a name, he might have made it. I mean, they like people with kind of interesting names. So if your name is Punta, you're on the team.
Yeah. Right. So
real
quick, and we'll move on to topic number 2. But Tyler Lockett getting extended for 3 years. Good or bad? Zeb, good or bad?
I hope good.
Hope is good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It seems like maybe a little bit too much money for. I don't know exactly what his ceiling is. I've seen people say, as high as Antonio Brown. I don't think that's gonna be the case. But if he trends upward and he is able to become a kind of where we thought he was going to be 2 years ago before he got hurt. I guess it's not like we're selling the farm to keep him. So I'll err on the side of it's being a good thing.
I mean, you hope it's what a contract is meant to be, right? You hope you've timed it right, and you're paying a poor player, paying a player more right when they're getting better. You hope it's sort of like Cam Chancellor's second contract or his first extension, right? Like when Cam first got paid, you're like, what? His very first extension.
Yeah.
But he grew into it. And you kind of hope it's that case. I'm a little worried it's more like a commentary on the talent level of the roster overall, because in years past, to get extended by the Seahawks, you had to be like the man, right? You had to be Cam Chancellor or Earl Thomas or Richard Sherman to get an extension because there was too many stars. And that second tier of good players, the centers had to let go. So, yeah, it's just the fact that there's just not a lot of stars around left anymore to make the money, right? So
yeah, I know a lot of people.
Sad commentary on our roster.
A lot of people are trying to compare this to the contract that Paul Richardson got, and I think it was pretty evident that the Seahawks were ready to let Paul Richardson walk. I think there's a lot of things to like about Tyler Lockett. I think there are definitely question marks, and there almost always are going to be question marks on any player that you sign. But specifically with Tyler Lockett is he healthy after being, more than a year and a half removed from, that leg break? And if he is, I think he has a lot of upside because statistically he was superior to Paul Richardson in every way. So I'm hoping for that. I think it's good.
I really, really like, and I think he has more potential in another offense. But he's a bit of a one-trick pony, isn't he?
I don't think he's a one-trick pony because I mean he can do stuff.
Paul Richardson across the middle. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it kind of I think it depends on how you view his skill set and like what you think you get out of it. But what he brings, even if you say that's a one-trick pony, it's a pretty good trick.
It is. It reminds me of I can't remember his name now. Who was the very, very first Seahawks speedster in the current era who could take the top off, but he never? Oh, who was it? In the early years of Pete Carroll.
In Pete Carroll?
Was early years of Pete Carroll with Seattle, we had a guy who could take. He had to retire, I think, because he was injured. I can't remember his name.
It was another Dion, wasn't it? Dion.
Not Peter Warwick.
Dion Butler.
Not that guy. The other guy what was it? 15.
Not Dion Butler.
No, different guy. I can't remember. Anyway, we've had this slide before.
Dr. Dag says Joey Galloway, but that wasn't the Pete Carroll era.
No.
Taco Wallace.
Hold on a second. Just a second. Let me see if I can find the guy. You can go ahead and move on.
All right, let's move on to topic number 2. So this is going to interrupt Ross here, but topic number 2, Earl Thomas, the prodigal son, returns. But have the Seahawks seen how this story ends? Birdfinger chimes in and says Braylon Edwards. I don't know if Braylon Edwards is the speedster, but Ross.
Sidney Rice. Sidney
Rice wasn't a speedster, but yeah, he was a really big signing.
I mean, he kind of like Sidney. I mean, like I felt like he was kind of taking Sidney Rice's role, and Sidney Rice mostly had that big impact where he kind of take the top off of defense. That was his designated skill for me.
Okay. All right. Topic number 2. So Earl Thomas, Ross, do you know how this story is going to end with Earl Thomas and the Seahawks?
I suspect it's a lot like the Dwayne Brown story last week. Comes back for one game for the Texans, and then the next week he's gone. I suspect that's maybe too strong. I think it's a possibility. I think it's a possibility that they look at it and go, well, you know what? A second from Dallas really is not that bad. Because it also is good. Right now you've got a few situations where it's going to hurt the team, I think. You're always compete. You've got these guys with blood, sweat, and tears all summer long. And then Earl Thomas walks in the room goes silent. You kind of picture like in a bar scene of the movie, right? The guy walks in the room, the bar goes silent, everybody looks at him, and like all of a sudden T2's out of a job. Everybody like who's been speaking up in the DB room all of a sudden has got to be quiet because we got to listen to Earl's sort of esoteric nonsense, which I love. But you know what? I mean, it's not going to end awesome, is it? I don't know. There's other scenarios, obviously, but I don't know how you really. I don't know how you look in a room full of guys and say we're always competing, but Earl doesn't have to compete because he's already done it. But at the same time, you're saying like we want to get a different kind of player who's not afraid of these guys. We're gonna talk about that later. But like Earl just like walks in the room after telling Dallas to come get him, after doing all this, that, the other thing, and he just walks in the room and he gets his job back. I mean, even Pittsburgh, like they said, if Le'Veon Bell had come back yesterday or whatever, they were still going to start Connor at running back, right?
Right.
But Earl just walks in the room and the room goes silent and, hey, the king is back and long live the king. And sorry, T2, yeah, I know you tried really hard and you're the only guy getting any interceptions in training camp and in practice, but Earl's back. So, all your competing doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Earl's back.
Nothing matters.
Doesn't matter. He decided he's going to play, so nothing anybody else does matters. He's going to play now.
Zeb, what about you? Do you know how this story is going to end with Earl and the Seahawks?
I don't know how this is going to end, but a friend of mine who goes by the moniker Takal on a little chat forum that we have, he knows how it's going to end. So I'm going to go with his scenario because he called Earl walking into the building ready to play this week when nobody else believed that was what was going to happen. And he says that Earl plays this year, and then we're going to franchise him the next 2 seasons after that, and then let him walk when he's 32 years old.
I really doubt that. I just don't think it'll be worth it.
That ends in the Walter Jones line of projection, where you basically go 2 or 3 years in a row being franchise tag, pushing your Lincoln Navigator up and down your driveway to get ready for the year, and then you're ready for game 1.
Exactly.
I don't know. What is the safety equivalent of pushing your Lincoln Navigator up and down your driveway? Is it like chasing pigs? Is that like a good thing?
Swimming in a swimming pool full of jelly.
Ooh, that's a good one. That seems like a very Earl thing to do.
Birdfinger is a good question.
Yeah, so Birdfinger says, if he's going to be traded, should the Seahawks risk playing him this weekend? So I think this is really interesting thing, and that's kind of like where I see where you're going, Ross, where you're saying it's the Dwayne Brown situation where he's going to come back, show teams that he can play, and then use that to kind of trade him. But we already saw that the Seahawks are not willing to take anything less than a first. The rumor initially was that the Cowboys offered a second. That has been refuted by Dallas beat reporters saying that the Cowboys only offered a third. So there's obviously a big gap between what the Seahawks want. Even if they're saying that they talk for a second, no one's offering a second. So that's the big thing. I think the Seahawks are a little bit more in line with what Zeb is saying, where like they're going to play him and they might franchise him at the end of the year, because I think what it comes down to is, let's say the market is a second rounder for Earl. Do you value a 1 year of Earl versus a second rounder for 2019 and beyond? Obviously, you get control of that player for a while, but I kind of feel like with this team, Earl Thomas is the difference between, 2 wins potentially. Like, he's that good of a player. And yes, safeties are critically undervalued and they're critically underpaid, but you don't stretch yourself beyond the market. You don't overcompensate because the market doesn't value them correctly. You say, well, this is what I can get away with because that's what the market allows me to get to pay. So I think the Seahawks, they've definitely shown their hand and say, like, we want you to be here. I think there is opportunity where the Seahawks could come back and offer him an extension, because if he plays well and if he's Earl and he still buys in and he's still everything they expect of him, he could still be a great safety for this team and help them get to the playoffs, and then we'll see what happens.
What makes you think they want to extend him, honestly?
I think the reason why they would extend him is because they've been through this dance with several players before. If off the top of the head, Marshawn Lynch, Cam Chancellor, Michael Bennett, they've all talked about their contract and wanting to get compensated for better pay. The Seahawks were able to work it out with them. Bobby Wagner, while he never held out...
Did the Seahawks think they did?
Well, I think the Seahawks were willing to make those contracts and they made them available. You know, at the end of the day, those contracts didn't work out. But I don't think the Seahawks are scared by their history either. The same way...
scared if you're just learning. That's I mean, putting a label. That's not fair, is it?
Well, that's the way I look at it. I don't think the Seahawks are going to say, like, look, we are so concerned about what happened with Cam and Marshawn Lynch and Michael Bennett that we're willing to forego an all-world-class safety. You know, Bobby Wagner played into the last 2 years' contract, but he reported to OTAs, he reported to camp, he reported to training camp and preseason, and he got extended. Russell Wilson did the same thing, even though he's obviously a little bit different of a character. KJ Wright did the same thing, and KJ is in the same situation as Earl Thomas, but you don't hear any commentary about KJ saying, like, oh, well, it's my last year, I'm not going to play for the team. The Seahawks have shown that, you know, people that buy in, they're willing to work with them. So I think there's a chance. I totally agree. I totally agree that there may be a bridge burn too far on a couple of these situations, especially with Earl. But I wouldn't shut the door on the Seahawks looking at actually retaining him beyond this year. Maybe it's a franchise option like what Zeb said, but I wouldn't shut it down, and I wouldn't be surprised. If I had to go between a trade versus an extension, like not even talking about him hitting free agency, if those are my two options, I would probably lean a little bit more towards an extension, even if it's like a franchise tag, over a trade. Because, like Birdfinger says, if you play him and the whole point is to trade him away, that seems like too much of a risk to have. I think the value is you want him on your team to help you win in 2018.
I couldn't disagree more. For me, the highest possibility is that he plays out the contract and then they get their compensation pick. Second highest possibility is that they trade him. Third, and it's a distant possibility at this point, is an extension. There's nothing in the Seahawks character like the direction they're heading, how they've made the decisions this past offseason, everything the coach has said, everything the GM has said. There's nothing that makes me think like they still want to keep themselves tied to third contract players, except for perhaps Russell Wilson.
Yeah. No, I think it's fair. I mean, we've only seen one third contract from the team, and it was the first of its kind, you know?
And like you said, like if it's, you know, normally if it's going to be stuff, it's going to be stuff of players who are all in, people who he's not all in. Last year, he was already asking Dallas to come get him. Yesterday, he came to camp to report and says, but you know what? He's not forgotten the disrespect. I mean, and the team still, and Pete Carroll today is still talking up T2. There's nothing. I'm not really sure where people even getting the possibility of an extension. I don't think they want him. I don't think Earl wants to be there. I don't get any indication.
I think Earl is crazy. I mean, he said he wasn't going to hold out, and then he did, and he said he wanted to play in Seattle forever, but he wanted a contract. So I think there's equal opportunity where they're saying they're talking about both ends out of their mouth. I wouldn't say completely, at least the way that I view it, that the door is closed on Earl Thomas being a Seahawk, not even past this year. I don't think I'm willing to shut that door yet.
We'll see.
Yeah,
we sure will.
I mean, it's going to be one of the most interesting things because, you know, like you said, Ross, like Tedrick Thomas, he's been talked about all camp, and you know that is a Pete Carroll thing to do, to like really talk up a player and like kind of hype him up and like, you know, be that hype guy for him. But
this is beyond that. I mean, this is talking. When you hear players talking, you hear again and again and again. The major guy who, for example, can pick off Russell Wilson because he can bait him over and over again during practice and so on, it's him. I mean, it hasn't showed up in the preseason, but I don't think it's just talk this time. And the other thing is, we talk about like the value of Earl Thomas. If he does play this year. That's and so you don't. I don't know. Like some of the things you're taking away the opportunity for younger players to develop as well, right?
That's true, but I also think that having depth is huge because that's a big reason why we were so bad 2 years ago. Like we had Russell Wilson playing amazing down the stretch, and then injuries just caught up to us, and that's last year as well. Injuries caught up to us, and having that depth, having people that we say like, you know what, we fully believe in them. I think that helps them for this year. But I do agree that it is a lot of unknowns, and that's kind of this whole 2018 year is like, what are we going to get?
Yep.
All right.
Well, I mean, let's move on then.
All right. We're going to talk about the topic number 3. So the topic number 3, this is the Hawkscast Corner. This comes from the Hawkscast forum. So shout out to Birdfinger. He created this topic. I'm going to read you the quote that he pulled. So if you're interested, go to hawkscast.com. The topic for this thread is called "Through This Fan's Eyes in Awe." So this is a topic here where the first quote is from John Schneider, and he says, "It's important for us to do a better job of getting guys in the building that aren't necessarily in awe of Cam Chancellor's and Bobby Wagner's and Russell Wilson's," Schneider told 710 ESPN Seattle's John Clayton. "We want guys in the building that want to compete with them." So there's a lot of great quotes. Birdfinger goes on to talk about how this is a quote that he read, and I don't think I can do it justice even if I tried to read it, because there's a lot of great posts in there. When you get a chance, check it out. But I want to talk about this idea, and we talked about a little bit on our last podcast, of the new guys being in awe of these big names, these big characters, and what that means. And now Earl Thomas has kind of come in and kind of like done like a huge change to what is going to happen to this team. Zeb, do you feel that these young players, because they've grown up watching football, because they've grown up watching, these teams do well, especially a team like the Seahawks, do you really feel that these players are limited and they're not going to be able to compete as much because they're too much in awe of these players, or maybe they're afraid that they're not going to live up to the pedestals that the players in front of them have created?
I mean, I think that would probably be more of an issue if all those guys were still around, but I think just the simple fact that they're not seeing Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor and Michael Bennett and those guys seeing them every day with the rest of the team, I think it probably didn't take very long for them to settle into their roles and realize that they have an opportunity to get on the field. I don't know. I'm sure there's always a bit of that for a young guy coming into the league, and all of a sudden you're on a team with one of your favorite players to watch. There's always going to be that feeling. But I think the types of guys who make it to the NFL are the kind of guys that are, they want to win, and they're used to being challenged. They're used to being in having to give it their absolute best to succeed. So I don't know that I think that that's a huge issue anyway, and I definitely don't think so, considering the fact that there's room for these guys now, and there's not a lot of those superstars around anymore for them to be in awe of. So I don't think it should be something that's going to affect this current team at this point.
Ross, what about you? I have a couple of things I want to talk about, but I want to get your thoughts real quick about this, because this is something that I know you feel really strongly about, and it was something that we had talked about. Like, is Pete Carroll and John Schneider, are they actually allowing these players to compete? If you bring back Earl Thomas, what happens to a Tetra Thompson? Is that a competing issue?
I think it's something you really, really consider, like the effect on the room. Again, Zeb's absolutely correct. I mean, if you've made it to the NFL, if you've made it to even like college football, you're probably pretty driven. Although you can get to college maybe just on athleticism. Once you get to the NFL, you're probably a pretty driven person. You're a natural competitor. You've probably been a leader before, but once you get to the first time in your life being a professional and being told it's completely different because now it's a lifestyle, not just a sport, it's different. And we've seen players who I mean, like star players whose characters have changed once they've had more of an opportunity. If you have a chance to like listen to Bobby Wagner this year, Bobby Wagner's been a star player for a number of years, but he's a different guy this year. He's leadership. He's the first guy out. He's the last guy to leave. He's controlling the tempo. And it's funny because you're reading between the lines, you can kind of see that he thought things kind of went off the rails the last couple of years because he's all business, and how he talks about how he thinks things should be being done is different. And so, yeah, if you want to take it to the Earl Thomas thing, you've got this room of defensive backs who are working really hard together. And maybe for the first time, they're in a room where it's not dominated by the huge stars. I mean, Richard Sherman's not just a huge star, he's a huge personality. And Cam Chancellor just dominates the room even if he's silent. And then Earl's got his thing going on. I don't know how to explain it. He's
just weird.
He's an interesting guy. He's an interesting guy. So that's that. You know, those three guys are all in the same meeting, same position meetings, same defensive meetings, and all of a sudden now they're not there. You're gonna tell me Tedrick Thompson or Dyson and all these other people, they didn't feel more comfortable speaking up this year? Griffin, I mean, he's only a second-year player, but all of a sudden he's now a leader, and that suits him. He gets to talk and he gets to say what he wants to say. But I can't help but think that they're going to be a little bit more reticent now that Earl's in the room. T2 can't say anything because what has he done? And it was funny because in the past you kind of got that feeling. Reading between the lines what Bennett and Sherman and others have said once they left the Seahawks, they're talking about like, you know, the management lost their way, they're getting rid of this good players. Like they all thought that they were like the core group, and they were right. But they also thought they were sort of like they had achieved more, and they were just kind of like a better, how can I say, a more important or whatever person, whatever. They didn't really have respect for the younger players. It felt like when you read between the lines. Maybe I'm reading too much, but I don't know, man. Like you have this room of people working together since April to August. And now a guy walks in, and now I don't know what that does. I don't know. I don't know. It's obviously not the same kind of job in it. Can you imagine working really hard to get up to like first violin in a concert, but then the guy who used to be first violin walks back into the orchestra, and now he's all of a sudden, you know, first violin? I mean, of course, they're not going to question it because he's done it. But I wonder about the effect, the intangible effect on the room, if that makes sense.
No, I'm definitely in line with both of what you guys are saying, and I think what will differentiate the 2018 version of this question is that the 2017 was coming off a down year. They didn't make the playoffs. They didn't go to the playoffs. They didn't win double-digit games. They were really close, but obviously came short in a lot of different ways. Dr. Dax and I, we were chatting about it, and we were talking about how Blair Walsh impacted that, and that's just something that really a lot of the players that are even on the team now and the big personalities, they didn't have any impact to that, but they still suffered for it. I think the biggest thing is the players that are coming into this team, the 2018 version, even the guys that were drafted last year in 2017, the one thing that Pete Carroll and John Schneider always seem to talk about is being humble, staying true to who you are, not trying to be like this big personality. Let the moment take over. Don't force it. And like you're saying, Shaquil Griffin has developed into a natural leader on this really young defense. And I think that's great. You know, he's also got his brother that he can mentor and kind of bring up, but still they're bringing that humble fire to the game, which is awesome. Bobby Wagner has kind of taken on this larger persona of this monster of a linebacker, and the way that he talks about the defense and what he wants his team to be, and you know, maybe the missteps that the team has had in the past. At the same time, all the commentary is they're welcoming back Earl Thomas. They're all excited. Doug Baldwin's talking about how he had to go up in the meeting room and just go give Earl Thomas a hug, like just to make sure he was there. I do think that it is a really, really big unknown of what that intangible aspect could be down the road. The one thing that I think with Earl Thomas and the fact that he is such a big person is that he's not vocal in the same way that a Michael Bennett or a Richard Sherman were, and not even the same way that a Cam Chancellor was. Even though Cam didn't speak a lot, when he spoke, people listened. I don't think Earl Thomas is like that. I don't imagine that he's the kind of guy that's like out there telling people what to do, or really speaking up. He's just kind of in his own world, and I think that's kind of the way that he lives. I think what will happen is Earl Thomas had already displayed early in this preseason and training camp that he's willing to teach these guys, and that's maybe not talked about a lot, but Tedrick Thompson talked a lot about how Earl Thomas was texting him back and forth and giving him tips, talking about the defense, talking about things to do. But like your analogy, Ross, like, you're bringing back the best person for this position. I think it's hard to not bow and let him take, that stage, because he can do so much. It's a really good topic. I don't know if I'm doing it justice because there's just so much to talk about, but I do think that it will be a challenge. But I think this particular draft class, the type of players that the Seahawks have gotten for this year, they are going to do really well, because I don't think they'll take things for granted. They know that they're not coming off a hugely successful year or a deep playoff run. It's a chance for them to kind of be something new. I think it was built. It was Birdfinger was talking about how this could be like a new development of a new version of whatever our Legion of Boom is. Like the 2018 version of the Legion of Boom could be coming right now, and I think it means that they have to kind of live beyond that moniker of the Legion of Boom and kind of create something new, maybe. Silence. Did we lose everybody?
Are we still here? What's going on?
That was weird. I just lost everybody for a second.
Okay. But like I said, if you get a chance, go to Hawkscast forum, hawkscast.com, look for this topic. It's through this fan's eyes in awe. It's a really great topic. There's a couple links in there. It's worth a read. Get your input in. Final thoughts before we move on to topic number 4?
I guess my final thought is I hope you're right. I mean, I do think you've got a point that if it's going to be one of these people's left over, one of the big people left over, you're Earl Thomas is the one you want left. He's probably the least likely to inhibit others just because of his character type, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe that's by design. Who knows? Because everyone else who's got that big personality, that big voice, they're gone. And I think that was definitely deliberate.
Yeah.
So, all right.
I agree.
All right, cool. So topic number 4, we're talking about the Denver Broncos. So topic number 4, the Seahawks have always started poorly on the road. Is this new look team going to change against Denver? So this is a game at the Mile Stadium. It's technically a 12:25 start time because it's mountain time, so only an hour behind Seattle. But Zeb, what's your take on this Denver team? What's your take on Seattle playing on the road to start the year? They've kind of got a brutal road schedule for the first 8 games, but you're going to be watching this game. You're going to be chilling.
Yeah, this early part of the season is really going to tell us a lot about this squad, man. All them road games. It's going to be interesting to see where we are coming out on the other side of that. Denver doesn't particularly scare me, but they are notoriously good at home at the beginning of the year, where we're notoriously bad on the road at the beginning of the year. So, obviously, trends like that don't really mean anything. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if we went out there and struggled this weekend. Lots of new guys, a lot of new stuff to figure out. Although I do think the first team offense and eventually defense did look pretty good during the preseason. I think it's a lot to overcome playing up there in the Mile High and in that atmosphere with all these young guys. It'll be interesting. I don't know that I'm necessarily predicting a loss, but I think it's going to be a struggle. I think it's going to be a hard fought game either way.
Ross, what about you? What's your take on this road game?
I think I'm full agreement with Zeb. I think it's going to be a really, really interesting challenge. I think it's going to be a really interesting game. I like I kind of like getting this out of the way early in the season, though. I want to see like their two outside linebackers coming at Russ and see what Russ can do straight off the bat. I want to see if Ifedi can do anything with that. I want to see if we can run the ball straight at those guys who want to rush the passer and see if that kind of shuts them up and knock them in the jaw a little bit. I want to see if our not so awesome, our what's it called now, the Legion of Whom, can stand up against their sort of has-been wide receivers. I think that's I think it's a good match. I think it's an interesting game to start off the season with. I really like how some of the dynamics work up, some of the matchups work up there. I'm even interested in seeing how their quarterback goes. I mean, last year in Minnesota, he was awesome. Before that, he was not so awesome in the Rams. And so, which one's real? So, there's a lot to look forward to in this game, I think.
I'm going to go the total degenerate way of comparing these two teams. Which player on the Seahawks was drafted before which player on the Denver Broncos? And I kind of feel like across the board, Seahawks players were drafted ahead of Denver Bronco players. Again, I know that's a really, really poor way of kind of determining who's good and who's bad.
That's awesome cherry picking.
But when we talk about quarterback, I would definitely take Russell Wilson over Case Keenum. Running back, Ross, we talked about it before the stream went up, and we were talking about like, hey, is Royce going to be the starter? Wasn't even sure. Chris Carson is getting a lot of love in the fantasy drafts that I've seen, so I think that's a slight edge. Demaryius Thomas, is he still in the Broncos?
He is.
He is.
Him and what's his name? The guys who've been around for a while.
Emmanuel
Sanders. It looks like Sanders has been Keenum's favorite target this preseason, from what I've seen.
Yeah, but I think if you look at Demaryius Thomas and Doug Baldwin, I kind of feel like Doug has been taken earlier, and then it goes maybe to the Denver wide receivers. So in those positions, I kind of feel like the Seattle has edge. Obviously, again, we're talking about a completely different game, fantasy versus real football, but just live with me here. I think that bodes well for Seattle, because what that means is people that are not as biased as we are looking at how good Seattle potentially could be. And I think that's kind of what it is. Like, the ceiling for these guys is a lot higher than maybe the ceiling it is for Denver, and I think that bodes well. But because it's that early road game, if we play poorly, I wouldn't be surprised at all, because it's also an AOC team. I don't think it's something that will really hurt us in the long run, even though everyone in the NFC will be playing, or NFC West will be playing the AOC West. It's a game that we could drop and kind of maybe learn from, but there's a lot of things to be excited about, I think.
Wait, is it an early?
No, it's a 1:25 local start, so it's a 12 o'clock Mountain Time.
Okay.
So it's a normal time for us. It's not a 10 a.m. game.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I gotta say though, their second wide receiver goes before ours. People draft Emmanuel Sanders before they draft Lockett.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know. I definitely agree.
We lose one.
But yeah, again, it's an imperfect science when we're talking about fantasy. But when you're playing with people that aren't fully invested in Seattle teams, I think it kind of gives you at least what a national perspective is out there for a lot of these players, and I think that does bode well. But obviously, it's not a full reality. The one thing that I'll say about Denver is that I don't know if there's any one thing that I think they do exceptionally well. Like, I don't think they have a great offensive line, which is, kind of like Seattle. So, maybe that bodes well for us. Outside of Von Miller, I'm not really sure who is on that defense that really...
Chubb.
Yeah, they drafted Chubb.
They got Chubb, the linebacker Chubb, not the running back Chubb.
So
the other Chubb.
We're talking about a rookie that is going to make impact where we have our own rookies. So, I think it's going to be a fair matchup. Like you guys have also said, what it ends up being, I don't think it makes or breaks our season, but it's maybe a kind of a good litmus test of what we could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like I said, I really like. I think it's really interesting. And it's great that it's a team that we don't know that well. This isn't, this the team we've ended up playing almost every year. I really like this.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting, and I think, it'll really set the table for the rest of this year,
I tend to go into this first game of the season always feeling like, well, now we'll know, after this game's over, we'll know what this team really can do or what this team's really going to be about. And then almost always after the game is over, it's like, okay, I don't know shit still.
Right?
Like we beat the Lions 9-6. So what are we going to the Super Bowl? I don't know.
Obviously, that's a clear sign that we're going 19-0.
Yeah.
All right, well, those are our topics. So we got some predictions for everybody. So, Ross, I'm going to hit you up with all of these first.
Oh, okay.
Final score, Seahawks at Broncos.
31-24.
31-24.
The days of our awesome are gone. We're going to allow about 23 points a game, I think, on defense. So we got to score more now.
Yeah, if we're scoring that many, that's not bad.
I think we will. I mean, who's got a better running back room than we got? Pretty good depth at wide receiver, especially Brandon Marshall's back. Vanette's underrated. Russell Wilson's going to be even better than ever. And we have an offensive line that's showing signs of not being in the infirmary anymore. So, we're all right. I think like I said, I expect our defense week in to week out to give up about 23 points a game.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to score a bit more than that in this game. So I think, and this is not an exception. I think they're going to come after the quarterback hard, but we're going to win.
Nice. Zeb, what about you? What's your prediction?
24-23 Hawks.
Nice. I'm gonna go a little lower. I think both teams are gonna come out rusty. I kind of feel like every team out of the first week in the season looks awful. So I'm gonna say 17-10 Seattle.
Sorry, what was that?
17-10 to Seattle wins it.
Janikowski, no. So Zeb, you have like Janik kicking a winning field goal to remove the curse of Blair Walsh.
Yeah, maybe. I think we're going to hold them to a lot of field goals. We'll get one ourselves.
Nice. All right, who is going to make the impact Griffin play, Shaqueem or Shaquil?
I'm going to cheat and say both, but one per half.
What?
Yeah, I was going to say one each.
That's cheating. Got to pick one.
Okay, it's gonna be. Shaqueem would beat. I'm gonna go with Shaqueem. I feel like that's too storybook, but everything else has lined up for the storybook. I mean, like everything's fallen in place for his story to be awesome. Right? We have to actually injure KJ Wright to get this guy on the field for his freaking first game. So destiny is on his side. Shaqueem recovers a fumble for a touchdown, and has a pickoff.
Whoa!
Wow!
Yeah.
That's
Get the bust ready in Camden.
That's like defensive player of the year in game one.
That's right. He is.
All right. Well, I'll take Shaquil then, just for the sake of not having the same answer as you.
Contrariness.
If you get a chance, before I answer, I want to talk about one of my favorite things the Seahawks have done in the preseason. What they do is they pit two players against each other, and they tell each other corny jokes. And the first person to laugh loses. And the most recent one is between Shaqueem and Shaquil, and it's the longest one, and it's by far the funniest. So if you're online, check it out. It's great. I'm going to cheat with Zeb, and I'm going to say it's going to be Shaquem. I think the linebacker position kind of opens it up a little bit more. I definitely see like a big tackle for a loss that maybe causes a fumble. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's going to be a fumble recovery for a touchdown or interception. That's too much. My heart couldn't handle something like that. Birdfinger says Shaquem with the sack fumble. I think that's the most likely option, so impact Griffin play is going to come from Shaquem.
Well, good. I hope you guys are all wrong. And I'm right.
You didn't even predict what Shaquille would even do. You just said he'll do it, so.
Well, yeah, but if you really want to know, he's gonna be the one with the strip sack and the fumble recovery and the touchdown. He's going to get the hat trick.
From the corner position. That would be intense.
Corner blitz.
That'd be awesome. I mean, they did a lot of that in preseason, a lot of that in practice, a lot of DB blitzes.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
I'd be happy to be wrong with that.
Yeah, prediction number 3. Does Ifedi finish the game at right tackle, yes or no? When we'll count injury. Just, does he finish the game at right tackle?
Yes.
Yeah, why not? Let's give the guy a chance.
I think once they quote unquote started this competition with George Fant, Ifedi's looked a lot better, and I think this is going well, and maybe that's kind of what he needed. But I kind of don't see how he can do it unless he really shits up his pants. All right, next prediction: who has more carries from the running back position? Davis, Penny, or Procise?
Ooh.
And real quick, Birdfinger says that Ifedi does not finish the game at right tackle. He's pulled for too many penalties.
Oh, man. See, that's bad.
I mean, like with Von and Chubb coming at him play after play after play, that's a possibility.
Yeah. All right. More carries. Davis, Penny, or Procise?
Procise.
Penny.
I'm going to go with Penny. So, for those of you who do not have Rashad Penny on your Yahoo Fantasy Draft teams, I just got a notification that Rashad Penny has been fully upgraded from questionable to healthy, and he is number 2 on the depth charts. So he's going to get the most carries.
What does he weigh?
It's going to be like 8.
What does he weigh? He ballooned to 340, I believe. Signs, because you guys didn't know if I was joking. He did not balloon to that weight. All right. More touchdowns. Russell Wilson or Case Keenum?
Wilson.
First name Russell, last name Wilson.
It has to be Wilson. We're the Seahawks FanTable. We can't vote for Case Keenum.
Look, if Case Keenum has more touchdowns than Russell Wilson, we're losing the game.
Well, no, because it could be like because what it could mean is like our running game has completely rejuvenated itself, and it could be like 4 rushing touchdowns for Carson, and then it would be like, okay, awesome.
Oh, just pounding the rock? That would be great. All right,
would be awesome.
This leads to the Ifedi question, and Birdfinger, you're going to love this. Over under offensive line penalties for the Seahawks, 4.5.
Over.
All right, Zeb.
Well, I guess I'll be the optimist here. Under.
All right, I can't push because I said it at 4.5. I think I'm going to go with over. It's the first game. It's not a great matchup for Ifedi, so I don't think he's going to go crazy, but he'll at least one, and then we're going to have like some garbage phantom holds that the NFL refs seem to be calling all preseason long.
Well, there's going to be at least like 1 or 2 legit holds on the line, right? Linebackers blitzing, and then there's going to be Ifedi. He's good for at least 1 false start, so probably 2. Because I mean, it's not every game where it's Von Miller standing over you.
Yeah, Birdfinger says it's going to be over, so I mean, I think we're.
I think it's just barely. I think it's 5.
We got a quorum. That's it's 5. We're all saying at least 5, except Zed.
I just want to be.
He's a contrarian.
Yeah, it has to be different.
All right, and the final prediction: over under helmet penalties. So 1.5 over under.
Under.
Over.
Again, I set myself up to fail because I can't push because I set it at 1.5. I'm gonna go with under because I think the NFL ref tendencies are to call stuff heavily in the preseason and then scale a bunch back in the regular season because they've basically been yelled at. Birdfinger's saying under as well.
Especially in this one, I think the backlash has been like I think they recognize they've kind of gone a little bit too far. A lot too far.
I hope so.
That's kind of the NFL. They always like, well, we went too far. Let's try and like get this under control.
The only thing they worry about more than lawsuits is loss of profits. So, like, this is actually one of the few things that everybody always says, like, I'll stop watching the NFL, I'll stop watching the NFL. This one, not as many people have said it, but that's what's scary. This one actually has, like, if they actually called it all the time as it was written, I think even I would probably stop watching as much. Like what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, the penalties that we saw in the preseason were pretty garbage. I mean, some of them were like, okay, that's obvious, but there was some like, that wasn't even a helmet. There wasn't anywhere that the helmet touched, yet they've pulled a flag. And if that's something they're going to say as a focal point, they really start needing to look at actually reviewing plays instead of just saying like, oh yeah, we trust a 55-year-old guy who saw a play from, 40 feet away. I
mean, like, somebody needs to take like a biomechanics class, right? I mean, like, if you're a human being and you're running, you're leading with your head. Unless there's something really, really wrong with you.
You just run really upright, barrel chested out.
Like, seriously, I mean, like, you have to lead with your helmet with your head. And so you can make that, I mean, yeah, it's just, there's no other way to making certain kind of tackles, and it's just dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got to chill.
Gonna ruin the game. This one is actually legit. People say, like I said, people say it every year, but most of the time it's just stuff you can adjust. In some ways, maybe the game is better for it, some of it. But this one really has potential to just ruin things if they called it as written.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting, but I definitely think, again, it's one of those things that they went heavy in the preseason and they'll scale back because, kind of like what you're saying, Ross, is they don't want to affect the product. And if the people are that upset about the product, that's going to be a big issue, and they can't allow that to happen.
Yeah, totally agree.
I hope you're right.
All right, gentlemen, that is our episode. Shout-outs.
Shout-outs to all the people in my fantasy drafts and Birdfinger for commissioning 3 of those leagues.
Whoa.
Well, and to Tony for co-commissioning the Foosball League with me and collecting all that money in. And Sammy that's you, Sammy, for getting the live draft so we can talk through my most important draft, and for hooking me up with your friend's auction league. And that's my first time with shout-outs.
All right. Zeb, shout-outs?
Shout out to Ariana Grande.
Yeah. Just cause.
I don't know the context, but congratulations to Zeb and Ariana.
Can I tell my really stupid Ariana Grande story?
Yes.
Sure.
So, like, living in Japan and being really, really old, I don't always have my thumb on the pulse of pop culture anymore, like cool pop culture. So, what was it, 3 years ago or whatever, I didn't know who she was. And then one night, like, a friend of mine said, Ariana Grande's nudes have been leaked online. Sent a bunch of them to me, and I was like, okay, that's interesting, that's weird, kind of creepy, but hot. And then the next day, weird coincidence, I go to the Seahawks game, and she was singing the national anthem, and I was like, wow, I've seen that chick nude.
Fortuitous.
That's my creepy, weird story. It was like a weird coincidence in life like that, right? Anyway.
Yeah, that's actually true.
So that's my sub story to your shout out.
It all worked.
It all worked. I knew, I could appreciate fully the lady singing the national anthem.
Shoutouts to Dr. Diags for checking out the stream live. I know he couldn't finish it with us, but we appreciate him popping in. Great commentary as always. Miss chatting with him a lot. So he should definitely come check us out even more at hawkscast.com. That's our Seahawks forum. Check it out. Got a lot of great posters there. Birdfinger, thank you for providing a great topic for us for the Hawkscast Corner, and thank you for checking us out live. Dustin Brown provided the music for our podcast, so thanks to him. You can find him on SoundCloud at BrownAMD. I'd like to thank Zeb and Ross for joining us as always. Great commentary. We are the Seahawks FanTable Podcast, and go Hawks.
Go Hawks.